Hey everyone, welcome to today's session. I'm excited to have Joe Hansen here on the Did You Find What You Were Looking For podcast. Joe's one of my closest friends. He was a business partner of mine on my really only successful business that I've been a part of, Buy Box Experts in Ozani. And I consider him to be one of the most influential people in my life. So excited to have him here and to hear a little bit about his story. So Joe, welcome on.
Thank you, Thad. Thanks for the warm welcome. That was great.
Yeah, no, I think you'll introduce yourself better than me. Maybe take a few minutes, let the audience know who you are, a little bit about you, what you like to do, and your family and some background stuff.
Yeah, I mean, where to begin? I was born and raised in Colorado. I grew up in
Okay.
Colorado Springs. I grew up down by the old airport and moved up to the Monument area when I was around 11 or 12. And then I found myself in Provo, Utah, going to Brigham Young University. I went on a church mission to Russia, came back, and I met my wife at BYU right when I was about to graduate.
And I
She was
think
born and
it's
raised in
it's good
Provo.
for people to know you got married very quick. You knew instantly, right, that Heather
Oh
was
yeah.
going to be your wife.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, if we're going to go there. So I dated a lot in college. So did Heather. She's my wife. And Heather's if I'm like a 6 or 7 on the attractiveness scale, which maybe I'm being a little bit too generous to myself there. She's like a
I
9.
think
She's
you're a
like a
six
10.
or
Okay.
seven.
She's a
All
10.
right, all right.
Um, And so I tricked her into marrying me. No, like seriously, we were set up on a blind date. We had both dated a lot, and our first date didn't go that well. She was really, really shy, and I took that for her being kind of stuck up. But I had a
Sure.
buddy of mine who was inspired enough to kind of tell me, "Hey, give her a second chance." And her own mom, who's the person who set us up on this blind date, convinced her to give me a second chance if I were to call her. And fortunately I did. We went out a second time. We really hit it off. And by the third date, I just knew. And so did she, if you ask her. It's kind of remarkable. We actually met on May 26th, 2006, and we got married August 26th, 2006.
Amazing. Almost 20
Yep.
years. That's pretty crazy. Almost 20 years.
Yeah, and she never planned on hanging around in Utah. She wanted to live somewhere else. But early on, when we were married, we started a business, and we'll get to that a little bit later,
Yeah,
probably,
yeah,
called Flirty Aprons. And we traveled a little bit as we were building that business. And every time we left the state and we were flying home, we just had this strong feeling, both of us at the same time as we're like flying into the Salt Lake airport, like this is where we need to be. And we've loved it. We've enjoyed staying here. We have 5 boys. I have a 15-year-old son, well, they're all boys. I have a
yeah.
15-year-old, twins that are 12, a 10-year-old, and a 4-year-old. So we're a very busy household here. Yep.
Yeah, I can vouch for the busyness. 5 boys.
And I mean, if you talk about things we like to do, like we are very active, right? They're
Yeah.
all involved in sports. They're all involved in some other thing besides sports as well, like programming or music or art. We love to be in the outdoors. We enjoy traveling. I just hate sleeping in other people's beds when I travel. It's very uncomfortable. So that's like the one part that always pushes me to go back home and be a little bit of a homebody is I don't get good sleep when I travel. But we do like going other places. And we love serving in our community. We're devoutly religious, and our church, where it's all volunteer based, so we spend a lot of time in that as well.
Amazing. Yeah, I can attest. Joe is an outstanding Christian, and so yeah, I've seen him do a lot in the community. Thanks. Yeah, I think you have. I think it's hard to find somebody that's been married for 20 years, have 5 kids. You're so involved with your kids' lives. When you first got married, 6 months really, that period of when you started dating to when you got married, uh, did you have intention to have 5 kids, and did you have intention to do it as quickly as you guys did, or was that kind of just happened? I'm just curious.
That's an excellent question. So I had always wanted a big family. I had 2
Okay.
older brothers growing up, and I had always wanted to have like a twin or a a younger sibling or someone close to me. And so I kind of wanted that. I was a little bit of a weird kid. I was kind of a serious, deep thinking kid, and I always wanted to be like married by the time I was like 6 years old. Um, Heather grew up in a bigger family, right? Six total kids in that family, and she wanted a little bit of the smaller one. And I mean, it's a crazy story. After four kids, we decided that we were done.
Mhm.
So, um, and we prayed about it, we thought about it, and it was a tough but also a good decision for us at that time. And so I had a surgery to where we couldn't have kids again. But then a couple of years later, talking to Heather, and she looks at me and she says, "Joe, you know, I'm not really done." I'm like, "Well, we kind of did something permanent there. This is going to be a little bit difficult."
The
So we
snip
go and we
snap,
talk
Michael
to,
Scott.
yeah, exactly. We go and we talk to a fertility doctor, and he says, "Yeah, you know, the odds of like reversing a vasectomy is only like 20% successful." How many years it
Yeah.
had been? He said, but we could do IVF. So they did IV. We tried to do IVF for a couple years, and it was a brutal process on Heather. It's not only emotionally taxing, like you could imagine, but physically, she gave herself hundreds of shots to get her ready.
Yeah.
Um, and we ended up with 7 healthy embryos at the end of it. 2 of them were girls, and 5 of them were boys. So you can see why we kind of naturally have a bunch of boys in our family, right?
Just
Well,
outnumbered.
we tried uh, we tried to have 2 of them implanted. One of them for the girls, one of them, and that one didn't work, and then the second one didn't work. And after that, this was like 7 years ago, I think. Heather said, "Look, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. It's too emotionally trying. Even though I felt like I needed another kid, something was missing in our family. I'm done."
Yeah.
Then, like a year or two later, we get this letter in the mail reminding us that we have these 5 healthy embryos in cryo storage. So we go and we talk to the fertility doctor, and he's like, "Well, he's like, you have a lot of options here. You can donate them," which I was sort of okay with that. But Heather was like,
Yeah.
"No
Yeah.
way. I will
Don't
always
want
wonder
little
if that was
Joe
my
running around.
child, right? Walking around there." Um, and so he's like, "Okay, if you don't want to donate them, you can have them destroyed." And we were like, "No, no. This is the potential for life. We don't want to have these embryos
Yeah.
destroyed." He said, "Well, then you can do what's called a natural discard." He's like, "You put them in you when you're not fertile." And it's sort of like when, you know, you don't get pregnant. What naturally happens, your body basically absorbs them. So we decided to do that. And Heather had to sign this documentation saying that she knew that this was a discard. This was not what they call a transfer. Because with a transfer, they like warm up the embryo really slowly. They do a lot of different things. I don't know all of them,
To
but they do a lot of
prepare.
different things
Yeah.
to prepare her and the embryo to like implant and it to be successful. They didn't do any of those things. They just put all 5 of them in. And actually, the time and day of it kept getting kind of rescheduled. And finally, they did it on like a day I was like out of town. So she's in there by herself, having these embryos put in her.
Embryos put in.
But then the funny thing happened. A couple weeks later, she's not feeling very good. She's like, "Huh, this is weird. This is like, it's like summertime. I can't be getting sick." Then the same thing happens the next morning. And she notices when she eats, it goes away. She's like, "No, no, 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 no." And the same thing happens the next morning. And then she's like, "Okay." And she goes and right now, at this time in our life, we've actually moved from South Jordan, Utah, which is this little community called Daybreak, down to Pleasant Grove. And we have a home being built. So we're living in like a 1,200 square foot apartment, but with 4 boys, 4 young children.
When you built your home with 4 boys in mind, right?
Correct. Yeah. When
Not
we
5.
designing this like kind of dream home-ish with 4 boys in mind. And so she goes to the back of the apartment that we're living in and grabs a pregnancy test that's a couple years old because we hadn't been doing this for a little while. And I hear this, "Joe, get back here." And so I'm like, "Well, what's going on?" I run back there and she's kind of shaking and she's nervous. She has PCOS, so she was taking this medicine that kind of helps her, and she was afraid of that affecting the baby because this shows that she's pregnant. And my reaction though is like, wait, you had 5 embryos put in. Heather, we're going to be on like TLC. You're going to have like quintuplets here. So I'm kind of freaking out from that angle. She's freaking out, worried about the baby. And we finally get in to see the doctor because it's not easy to get in to see a fertility doctor. Like, you have to schedule these things weeks, months out, right? So we have to call them, and they're like, no, this doesn't sound right. What? This Heather Hansen? Finally get her in. They do a blood test, and like, oh yeah, you're pregnant. And then it takes us all day to get in to see the doctor. And by the end of the day, we finally get in and see him, and we have an ultrasound, and there's one healthy embryo that made it. And this doctor says, this is a medical miracle. He's like, I called my colleagues. They've never seen this happen. He said, I've never seen this happen. This baby should not have been able to implant and survive. You weren't producing enough progesterone. I know we're getting into like medical terms here for your audience, but
good.
He's like, this should not have been possible. But today we have our 4-year-old Chase. And I thought maybe God would bless me with like an easy child for my last one, but I think I needed a lesson in humility.
So Joe and I both have 4-year-old boys, and they're fun. We recently got them together. They're playing, and it's 4-year-old boys are not for the faint of heart. I can relate.
It's a fun age, though. It's a great age.
It's a fun age. So Joe, I want to. When I met you, it was just you were. I guess you guys had not gotten pregnant yet, so you just had the 4 boys. And you had sold, I think it was 5 businesses before Buy Box Experts, which was the one that we worked on together. Can you talk to me a little about your journey, starting with Flirty Aprons? You've done immensely well in business, selling businesses of all sizes and types. Just talk to me a little bit about how you got started with Flirty Aprons. What motivated you as an entrepreneur early on?
Yeah, so I was pre-med in college. I actually had a hard time making up my mind. I was like a super, super senior, embarrassingly so. There was kind of understanding of that. But I had taken all of the prereqs for either physical therapy or medicine. So I was pre-med, but then I had this wonderful professor, Brent Phelan, at one of the last classes I took in college for orthopedic impairments. It was like a physical therapy type-ish class. And it kind of made me question whether I wanted to go to med school. And so I took the GRE instead of the MCAT and did really well there. I was starting to apply to physical therapy schools. But the fact that I could change my mind so quickly on something so big kind of made me feel like disconcerted about wherever I wanted to go. And so I was working as a personal trainer at this time, and a colleague of mine gave me a book called The E-Myth. E-Myth is the entrepreneurial myth. It's a book written by Michael Gerber. And the premise of that book is most people think that small businesses are started by entrepreneurs, but most of them are started by a technician that had their entrepreneurial seizure. And that's why like a shoe repairman starts a shoe repair shop, right? Or a doctor starts a medical practice. And his claim, and I think it's largely supported, is that's why most small businesses fail, is because they don't have the entrepreneurial and the managerial skill sets or vision that they need. And when I read that book, I had my entrepreneurial seizure. I realized that like a bunch of the things I had done throughout my life were very entrepreneurial. I just didn't realize it. I had always thought that being in business meant working in a cubicle till you were 50 years old, then getting your corner office. And it was part of like the big, industrial machine of business or something. I had never even grasped that it was like you could innovate and create and make a business that way. I guess that's kind of like the expectation, sort of like go to college, get a job in some way and move forward in some sort of career path was what I was raised with. And so when I read that, I had my entrepreneurial seizure. And instead of going off to physical therapy school, I
Was
actually,
it really just like one moment where it just came over you in like a seizure way, or was it a sequence of events that kind of led you to believe that
I
you
would
need to be an
say
entrepreneur?
over the course of like the time period of reading that book, right? Because I had read another book that sort of gave me I'll call it like an entrepreneurial seizure moment. And that was Rich Dad Poor Dad,
Okay.
right? And I
Okay.
read that
Yeah. Yeah.
years before.
Yeah.
But that book, after reading it, it was kind of like, well, this is amazing, but I could never do that. That was the voice in my head.
Okay. Okay.
When I read the E Myth and I saw how you didn't need to be a brilliant inventor like Steve Jobs and understand like create like the Mac,
Yeah.
right? Or the iPod or the iPhone or any of those things. You didn't need to be that. You could innovate around process. You could
Mm.
innovate around the structure of something, right? It didn't need to be like, I'm creating a new widget over here. Like you could just rethink how people do their work, and that there could be a business off of that. That opened up the idea of who all could participate in it, and that made it feel accessible to me. So the
Mm.
E-Myth really opened it up for me, and I think over the course of reading that, I think it took me about a month to read it. Because I would read a bunch of it, but then I'd go back through and read it again, and I'd go back through and like read portions again and again and again to make sure I was really grasping it because it was just so like intoxicating for me. And by the time I was done with that over a month, I knew that I didn't want to go down this path and I wanted to go down this entrepreneurial path.
Mm.
And at the same time, my wife was working at Independent Study. I think she was like the instructor liaison, and she had moved into the position of it was the same position that Jamie Taylor had had, and Jamie Taylor had moved on to a new one in the org, and they got taught. She and Heather got talking, and they said both of their husbands wanted to start a business together, but really it was all four of us wanted to start a business together.
Yeah.
So we met as two couples, and we got to know them a little bit. We decided we wanted to go into business together, that we both had a passion and kind of hunger for it. And then we met one Saturday, and I asked everyone to bring 10 business ideas. So we each had 10 business ideas. There were 40 total ideas. And as we're going through these, I'm looking at them and I'm like, these are great, but some of these are going to take like $20 million to do. Like one of them
Mm.
was like a
Yeah.
Jeep
Yeah.
park or something like that. And it's like, oh my goodness, how are we going to raise the money to do this? We have no prior business
Yeah. Huge
experience.
overhead. Yeah.
So uh, just like off the cuff, I was like, I think we need process of elimination here. Let's cross out all of the ideas that can't be done with little time and little money. So we're
Okay.
crossing out all these. And we get down to like 4 ideas out of the 40 that are left, like 10%. And one of them is these aprons that Jamie had made a year prior for her mother-in-law. And then Heather, my wife, she had been a model, she had design experience. So she and Jamie together brainstormed taking that kind of cute apron, but making a very thick waist tie instead of a thin one, making it longer so you could wrap it around yourself and accentuate your waist, make a bow out of it. And then utilizing kind of modern pattern designs with it. And we took what was sort of a cute apron and turned it into something that was, I like to say, the child of Williams Sonoma and Victoria's Secret, right?
Yeah.
Something that
Yeah. That's
allows a woman
sexy.
to feel sexy and attractive.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we went out and we figured out how to do it. I started learning from some of the best business experts here locally in the Center for Economic Development in Orem. There was also like the Small Business Development Center in Orem. And I
Huh.
had some early mentors like Ken Fackler from Fackler Tires. You would think, oh, what's the crossover there? Well, he wasn't teaching me about how to sell tires. He was teaching me how to start a business.
Yeah.
And as that started, we got these aprons manufactured here locally. We bought some fabric from some designers like Robert Kaufman, who's like a domestic fabric supplier, and we
Okay.
had them sewn. Luckily, in Provo, there was a cut and sew facility called Authentic Concepts, and it was like 2 miles from our house. We went
This
there.
was when? This was like 2008 or something, or
Yep,
when was this?
yep.
Okay,
Beginning of
2008.
2008. Yep.
Okay.
And at the same time, I'm learning about like what an LLC is, right? Like why you need a business banking account. Like I'm learning about all these legal things. Luckily, I had
Yeah,
taken
yeah.
Accounting 200, in that accounting course. I took a lot of different courses in college. Like I said, I was a little bit sort of ADD on what I wanted to do, but that sort of paid off. This diversity of like understanding a lot of different things really, really paid off in the business side because I understood accounting really, really well. I understood
Yeah.
statistics really, really well. I understood marketing and all these things. And so I'm learning all these kind of business things that you probably would learn with a business degree or an MBA or something like
Yeah.
that. And we're prototyping and coming up with this design and we're manufacturing it and we're taking out loans to do it. And this is like right before the financial collapse, right? In
Okay.
2008.
Okay.
So we get like $100,000 business loan, I think from Zions Bank and some other personal loans and things like that to put into inventory. And we start selling these aprons at a mall, the Orem University Mall, as a beta test. And we're there.
It's
and
like
we're
a kiosk.
this is a
It's
beta
like
test.
a pop-up kiosk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like one of those kiosks that you see like, 15 or 16-year-old boys or girls working at in the mall.
Yeah.
And you feel sorry for them when you walk by,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we're staffing it, but we're not feeling sorry for ourselves because at this point we're like, hey, we're going to emyth everything. We're going to make a system out of everything. It's going to be perfect. So we're there at the mall saying, we got to do this first because we need to design the system that makes it a perfect customer experience. And I say that, a little bit like, I guess, mockingly of ourselves, because as you get into it, you realize like you're never going to perfect any of these things.
Yeah.
But it did lay great groundwork for us trying to build great process so we weren't people dependent in the business as we moved forward. But we got
I love
got
the
some aprons on.
naiveness of when you're starting a business, how naive you are. At least I felt so naive. And actually
Totally.
the Shoe Dog book, what I really love, Phil Knight talks about the power of being a beginner is that the opportunities are endless versus the
Absolutely.
expert sees only a few opportunities. So I love it. Like the expert may not have even started Flirty Aprons because of all the potential consequences and failure opportunities. And you guys are just like selling stuff in a pop-up shop in a mall within months of coming up with the idea. So that's awesome.
Yeah, well, and that reminds me of like a lot of what our family said to us early on, right?
Yeah.
I had an older brother who has an MBA and a PhD in business marketing. I have an older brother with an economics PhD. They're great guys. And then Heather has a family that's all in like the medical field, right? Nurse practitioners, doctors, things like that.
Yeah.
And they're all saying, don't do it. Don't do it. You're going to fail. Don't do it. You're going to fail. And it was interesting because like that naivety to me, another way of describing it is like energy.
Yeah.
We had this strong sense of energy that you kind of get through naivety because you don't really know all of the hard things you're going to face. You don't know how difficult it's going to be. You don't know all these things that really should sort of make you unsuccessful. But because you have so much passion and faith in what you're doing, you push against that inertia and you actually make it work. And yeah, without that naivety, that energy of naivety, I don't think we would have been successful. I mean, in the early days, it's like we're living on $1,000 a month from the business or $2,000 a month in the business, right? A couple of years into it, we had a kid and we're renting out our basement. We're living in like 600 square feet in the top. And we get like $1,500 a month from our business. And we're still taking out more and more personal loans and credit card debt to try to make the business work. Yeah. And that is something that I think if you want to start a business, it's a lot easier to do when you're younger. It's a lot easier to do when you have less to risk. It's also a lot easier to do when you have that youthful energy and enthusiasm and passion and the naivety that we're talking about. It's not that you can't do it later. There's a lot of late bloomers I've seen do it. And late bloomers, I mean, that may be a little bit of a misnomer. This can be people just in their 30s or 40s doing it. But when you're in your early 20s, oh man, it is so much easier to take that plunge and get into it.
I started my business at 21. I totally agree with that. Everyone was like, you could fail. And what happens if I fail? I go back to making $15 an hour and I'm just fine. Right? Like when you're leaving a multiple six-figure job with a mortgage and a car payment and a family and costs of children, that's a risk. That's when you're risking a lifestyle that could really hurt you for a long time.
And it was tough. I mean, there were times when our business was close to failure, very
Yeah.
close. And I had to look in my wife's eyes and tell her we can't take any money from the business this month or next month. And guess what? I just took out another $15,000 loan.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's heartbreaking. And what's more heartbreaking is I saw the trust in her eyes,
Yeah.
right?
She believed in you.
It's like, okay, this is hard, but I trust you. And so it's like, oh wow, everything's on me. I got to do this.
So
Well,
during that time, Joe, I really want to understand your motivation. Like what motivated you to put so much on the line with personal credit cards, not taking money, going through and staffing like a little booth on the weekends and at odd times when it probably wasn't convenient. Like what was your primary motivation?
well, okay, so let me take a step back here. I'm going to
Yeah, go
weave
for it.
back to
Yeah.
where I was,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So we get the aprons launched at this kiosk in the mall, and they're doing well. People like the initial reaction is actually really energizing for us, to keep using that word over and over and beat
yeah.
it. The people would walk by in the mall, and they would just like these women would just look at it, and they would like run into someone because they were like staring at it. They hadn't seen anything like it before,
Yeah.
right? Or they just smile. It's like you could see this, like there was something different about this product that caused like a visceral reaction in the person.
Yeah.
And when Mother's Day came, I mean, we sold out of our stock. We didn't have enough. And so we started having our stuff manufactured in China. And that ties back to like taking out the $100,000 loan and all these other things.
Got it.
Well, and so it kept taking off in the like local area. We launched a website. We paid $800 for a website at the time. And
Classic. That's awesome.
I started just kind of shadowing some of the best experts in the country around like SEO, PPC, affiliate marketing. Social was really nascent at the time. At that time, both Heather and Jamie followed some blogs. One was like the Pioneer Woman, and there were some other ones that were really popular. And I won't claim that I was the first person to do this, but I hadn't seen anyone else do this at the time. The idea came to me of why don't we give some of these aprons to these mommy bloggers and have them review the product and even let's offer a few more for their readers, right? Their readers visit our site and say which one is their favorite and come back and comment on our blog. So that gets them more engagement on their blogs. It's good for them. We'll send out a
For
free
them.
apron to them. Well, and they would often like link to us saying like, check out Flirty Aprons, and the link would be on aprons or sexy aprons or cute aprons or whatever. So all of a sudden we had like hundreds, and over the course of several months, we had several hundred of these blogs and we had to give away a lot of product. It wasn't cheap, right? This is what we're paying for here, and we're not. But what we saw was
You're taking
each one of these
$1,500 a month.
blogs,
They can
man,
read
tons
this.
of traffic, and that traffic converted really, really well. And so
Oh
we kept
yeah.
doing that. And all of a sudden, like within several months, we were ranked number one on aprons, on cute aprons, on sexy aprons,
Wow.
and flirty aprons. And then we got tons of organic traffic coming in. Well, I'll just say this, and then I'll get back to your question here. At
No, yeah, that's great.
the end of the first year, I'm looking at our P&L for December. And on our site, we've sold, or on our kiosk locations, we've sold about $150,000 in revenue in December. And we've
Okay.
made about $15,000 in profit. So,
Okay.
or we'll call it
10%.
net income, not profit, right? So net income attributable, 10%. Not bad. First year in business,
Yeah.
December, right? You look at our website, 25,000, 25, it's like 25 or $28,000 in sales, $15,000 in net income. So all this work that goes into this, I call it stupid kiosk, because it was so frustrating to manage. Like there would be times when there would be many, many times when I or Spencer, my business partner, would have to just go in there. Like it's usually like 3 times a week when someone didn't show up to either open or close it. And you're sitting in there, you have your wife and your kids at home, and it's like you're there manning this dumb kiosk. And, and it produces, hey, $10,000 or $15,000 in net income. But then you have this website that sold like a fifth the amount, and it makes the exact same
Wow.
amount of money. It's like, where should I be investing my time? Where should I be improving my expertise?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that next January, I went and I spent $20,000, which I felt was like an astronomical sum at the time, on a
Yeah.
website. This company called Capital One Media, if I'm remembering that correctly. They had built like the site for Pike's Place out in like Seattle, the fish
Okay.
market, right?
Yeah. 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 I've been
Um,
there.
and we had a site redesigned there, and we started devoting all these resources to it, and it just flourished and took off. Our revenues went up even a lot more, and our profitability soared. And then that's when I got into the expertise of like e-commerce. We still
Okay.
expanded our retail a little bit. We got into Bed Bath and Beyond on like regional test. We got into hundreds and hundreds of mom and pop stores across the nation. But e-commerce was where we focused. And then I developed a lot of expertise selling on Amazon. I sold both directly to Amazon as a third party seller on Amazon. And that's where that led to a lot of the eventual other companies that I would do, is from that expertise on the marketplace channels.
Love that. That's a great journey. And so, how long from starting to finishing, or to starting to sell, were you running Flirty Aprons? What was that time period?
8, 9, 10, 11, right? We sold the end of 11. So about 4 years.
4 years. Okay. Okay.
And I started some other businesses along the way. Lova Bibs, which was a kids kids apparel business. Cool Wall Art, which is a home decor company. Centric, after I sold Flirty, it was a fashion accessories and watch where we resold product.
Okay.
And um, those weren't as successful as Flirty, but they were successful. I was able to build them and sell them. One of them I just broke even on, but learned a lot from them. And after selling all four of those companies, I decided I sort of wanted a lifestyle business. That's why I started
Yeah.
Buy Box Experts. And in 2015, I met James Thompson. I was at this conference up in Seattle called SCOE. It's a little tiny conference, like a couple hundred people go to. And it's all about Amazon. And I'm sitting there and I'm in this breakout session, and there's this lady leading it, and she's trying really hard, but she really doesn't have much business being up there leading this breakout session, because she doesn't really know a lot of what she's talking about.
Yeah.
But not to fault her, almost everyone in the room doesn't really know a lot of what they're talking about. Then this person in the back says something, and I'm like, whoa, I've never heard someone like unravel the black box of Amazon so quickly, and with so much specificity.
Yeah.
And it's James Thompson, by the way. So I'm like, I need to talk to that guy. And I go and I talk to him afterwards, and I'm just like dumbfounded. He's worked at Amazon for 6+ years. He previously worked at like Boston Consulting Group and some other things. And he's like, hey, I don't want more business. I have a lot of people asking me to do consulting. I don't want to do it. I want to know a reputable place I can refer it to. Like, well, I guess I'm reputable. Like, I'm not dishonest in any way, but I'm still learning. I've learned a lot. I know how to
Yeah.
grow these businesses, but I don't know everything you know about Amazon.
Yeah.
Will you
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
teach my company? So I hired him to come out for like a couple of days, and we just took notes for like hours and hours and hours and hours at a time with him. Then he goes back to Seattle, and a couple of weeks later, or maybe a month later, he and I start talking again, and we talk about this show that's going on, Amazing Selling Machine Time,
I
which
remember
I
that.
felt was,
So,
I guess to be candid, I felt like it was like snake oil. It was
okay.
like,
Yeah.
here's the 5 secrets to make $1 million. And
Yeah.
James and
Yeah.
I kind of both agreed on that. And we went to, so a couple months later, we went to a show called, so we started working on a project called Marketplace University. Started writing all this material to create a like training program that people could watch to teach them not the 5 ways to make $1 million, but the 500 ways you can lose your life
Yeah. Yeah.
savings if you don't do it
Yeah.
right.
The actual
And we
like
worked on that
small and
together.
simple things over and over
Mm-hmm.
and over again that drive
And it
success.
was
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of content. It was really time consuming. We spent a lot of money on it. And we never made a dime from it. But the process of doing it was really, really educational for both of us. We learned a lot about the expertise of it. Like, even more so than we knew before. But also we came to understand that we both had very similar core values of each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we went to this show called Catalyst by Channel Advisor, and
Yeah.
it's a pretty cool show. A lot of pomp and flair, but we felt like it was really self-serving, and you had to pay to play to get on stage.
Okay.
And so, sort of naively, like we were talking about before, James and I were like, we can do better than this.
Start a
And
show. No big deal.
usually I would think about something, but James just went up right to like the casino offices that we were in Vegas, and he just said, "What do you need to do a show?" He started talking to them about.
That's awesome.
Oh, I love James. And he came back, and he's like, "Okay, this is what it would cost. This is what they would do. Like, you don't have to pay for anything if you guarantee a certain amount of rooms, but if you don't fill those rooms, you have to pay for those rooms, or you can pay for the space, and you can do this and this and this and this." And I mean, James explained to me that like his way of thinking, a lot of it came from Amazon, because Amazon taught them like, here's a big hairy goal, but what you're going to do is you're going to say, yeah, I'm going to go reach that goal. What I'm going to do is work my way backwards and say, what exactly, every step I need to do to go
That's
get
how
there.
it starts.
So you
Yeah.
just start with step one. And so we started working on what we call Prosper Show. We built that up. And after starting to build that and it taking up a lot of James's time, I invited James to become a partner in Buy Box Experts. It's like, hey, we need better credibility. We also need better recognition. And I mean, by this time, it's like 2015, and I feel like I have a very, very firm understanding of everything that's going into Amazon, what's needed to grow businesses on it, help them be capable, both on the 1P and 3P side. And so the business is starting to grow, even though it was supposed to be a lifestyle business. So I invite James to come on, not to work really on BBE, but to work mostly on Prosper, but be a little bit part-time BBE. And then I focus my efforts just on the marketing of Prosper. So James was putting together the agendas and running the show and doing all of that heavy lifting. And I was driving the people to buy tickets to the show. And our first one was in Salt Lake City. It was a big success. I think we had like 700 people to it. And then we had it in Vegas, and we had like 1,200 or 1,500. And then it was even bigger the next year. And we sold it after 3 years to a company called Emerald Expositions. And after that, I was like, James, maybe we should take BBE seriously. And I think James and I, we always had a little bit of a conflict with each other on BBE.
You said 2017?
We sold it in
after 2017. You sold it?
End of 2017, I think. And he's like, okay, yeah, I guess. He never really wanted to manage a big agency. I'm like, but you don't need to manage a big agency. I'll manage a big agency. You have a specific role that you bring to the company that's really important for us.
Yeah.
And so we semi agreed on that, and we sort of went on like an acquisition merger spree for the years that followed. We acquired a company, acquired a company out of Washington called the Frontier Group, or the Karen Company, and then there was Nozani, which was fantastic, and we need to talk about that. There was Agility. There was another company in Germany, which is like my biggest professional mistake of all time, is buying a company in Germany and not understanding the repercussions of that. But we sold BBE in 2021 to a company called Spreetel.
That's 4, 5, 6 acquisitions that you have founded, probably totaling $100 million in enterprise value. Would you say? Market value.
All I'll say is what's more important than the value of all these companies, of producing and selling them, is the lives that it's touched. The other day, I spoke to an individual. I won't say his name on here, but he's based out of Pakistan. And I think it was back in like 2021 or 2022. Our team was really sort of skittish about hiring anyone out of Pakistan. Anyone was. About hiring anyone out of there. They'd hire people from India or Philippines or other places if you were doing some sort of international hires, but they wouldn't hire people out of Pakistan. And I took it, and I was like, whatever, like vet the individual. I don't care about the reputation of the country or the region, vet the individual more than anything else. And then put appropriate measures in place to make sure that they have appropriate electronic security and other things like that. So that way we're protected as well. And we hired this individual. And they started out as like an assistant advertising manager, became an ads manager, became a director of ads, for many, many people. Um, and I spoke with this person several months ago, and he said, "You may not realize this," he said, "but when you took a chance on me, all sorts of and I grew in that role, and I gained visibility, and I hired a bunch of other people from Pakistan." He said it was like a domino effect. All these
Mm.
other companies started hiring people from our area, and he said there are hundreds of families that now have work because of that. This
That's
is something
amazing.
I can't say without feeling and expressing some of that emotion, because it's like I didn't even realize that type of impact I was having.
Yeah.
But when I see that, and then I talk to other people at BBE or the other businesses, there's this profound impact on people that
Mm.
is that you don't get any other way than by helping grow them and helping them develop competence and capability, and helping them develop a living that they can provide with their family.
So it sounds like in hindsight, you look at that with this immense fondness. When you started Flirty Aprons, was it to impact people, or what was your motivation? The beginning of your
My motivation to
entrepreneurial
start
journey.
Flirty Aprons was a means to an end. So Flirty
Okay.
Aprons was never the end, right? It was, I want this small business to generate more capital for a bigger business.
So you can, okay.
Um, but the idea was always like financial freedom. It was kind of like
Yeah.
this idea that I sort of had been. You've seen the movie Inception, right? I think,
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
the author of Rich Dad Poor Dad has done this massive mind trick on millions and millions of people. Just like the movie Inception, he's like put that into the minds of everyone that they all want financial freedom.
Yes. Yes.
So we're all striving for it, right? Um, and so that was the idea. It's like, I want to start this and I want to create a business. And the EMIS showed me that I can do it, and I believe that I can do it. And here's the way that it can be applicable to me with my unique skill set. But as I got into it, and looking back at it now, and after years of being in it, it's a lot less about the financial freedom.
When did that stop? When did that start shifting for you? Because I imagine maybe it was when you had some financial freedom that you were able to shift, or when did that motive start to change?
No, it started to change. I would say it started to change around 2017, 2018 is when that
Okay.
started, or a little bit before that, about 2016. Um, I had an experience a couple years prior to that where my oldest son was like 4 or 5 years old. I was working from home. It was like a Friday evening or Thursday evening, and the sun, it was like picturesque. The sun was like bouncing off of the landscape, and like it was gorgeous outside. And my son comes in and he asks if I can jump with him on the trampoline. And I could. I didn't need to tell him no, but I was like, I just want to wrap up my work and be done with it. And then I'll go jump with him. So
Okay.
I said, no, I can't right now. I'm working. But his response kind of surprised me. His response wasn't, oh, his response was like, okay, Dad. And he like smiled, and he's almost happy that I had said no. It's kind of weird. It's like, what? Weird. But he like bounced off, and he went and he started jumping on the trampoline. So I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll finish this up quick. I start working on it, but you know how things happen when you think you're going to
One thing
wrap up
leads
your
to
work.
another. Yep. Yep. Yep.
It's
Yep.
like 45 minutes or an hour later. I go down there, and he's already inside helping my wife make dinner. And I'm just kind of like, oh, I feel this like pain in my stomach. And I can't really describe it. I knew that I'd missed out on an opportunity. It's not the end of the world. Like, it's not like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not
You
like I
can
missed
do
out
it
on his
again the
wedding. Like,
next
hey,
day.
I'm being a
Yeah.
responsible dad here. I'm doing the work, and
Yeah.
I'm not a workaholic. I spend lots of time with my family. But then a couple of days later, I'm taking him to preschool, and this song comes on, and I've heard it many times before, but I had never actually paid attention to the lyrics. It's called "Cats in the Cradle."
Okay.
If you ever heard that song, right? It's about a
I'm
dad.
not even familiar with that song.
You're gonna have to listen to it after this.
I guess
Thaddeus, come
that's
on.
the takeaway.
This
I'll
is
have to
like those
listen to it. My
conversations
kids
we
will
have, like
probably
the
love it.
generational gap. I think right here,
Yes,
you don't even
yes.
know who
Cats in the
Chicago
Cradle. I'm
is or something
making
like
it
that.
out. I've
Okay.
heard of this song. I couldn't tell you what it says. I'm
So
making a note here.
there's this great part in it. Well, the premise of the song is that the dad is always too busy.
Uh,
He's like, the kid says, "Hey, play ball with me," and he's like, "Not today, right? I got to do these things." At the very beginning of the song, it's like he wasn't there for his kid's birth, basically, because he had lots of bills to pay, so he's traveling. Then and so like he isn't there for his son, but his son says that's okay, and he walks away with a smile, and he says someday he wants to be like his dad. And then later on in the song, the dad wants to spend time with his son, but his son's like, "I'm sorry, Dad. The kid's sick. He's got the flu." Or he comes home from college and he's like, "Sorry, Dad. I just want to borrow the car keys." And he goes away.
mm,
And he says, "And when I hung up the phone, it occurred to me my son was just like me. My son was just like me." And it's like, I realized these are fleeting opportunities in my life. They're fleeting moments. They don't stick around. Um, I was worried about not being responsible and missing out on the opportunity that would provide income. But it's like this other moment was precious, and I'm never going to get that back. There's these two types of time that the Greeks talked about. We use the word time, and we have like one word for it, time. But the
yeah.
Greeks saw time under two kind of different personalities. There was Kairos and Chronos. Chronos is like the time we think of. It's like on the dot, measured,
Yeah.
chronological. Kairos is like times of fleeting importance, right? So these are time. It's a moment in time that doesn't come around again. And so like I started as I started like understanding that better, it's like I want to schedule my day so I can manage the chronos so that I can be present for the kairos moments. Um, and so I did
I like
something
that.
after this.
What? Yeah. What did you? I want to come back to this Kairos moments, but
Okay.
yeah, keep going.
So
What did you?
so I did something after this. I changed my password. I
Okay.
I'm going to
On
tell
the
you what
computer.
my old password on my computer. I'm going to tell you what my old password was because I don't use it anymore. Okay, my old
Okay.
password was
Okay.
made
Everyone
20
write
by
this down.
40. It means make 20 million by the time I'm 40 years old. And I'd sort of become
Okay.
obsessed with that idea, right? The idea that I need to make $20 million because I wanted financial freedom. I didn't just want financial freedom. I wanted like uber financial freedom, right? Because if I had 20
Yeah.
million
Yeah. Yeah.
bucks and if I only draw 5% of that a year, so that way I can keep up with inflation and other things, I'm getting $1 million a year and I can live whatever lifestyle I want. I didn't really understand the repercussions of that being a password that I type every single
Every
day,
day.
multiple times a day into my email and other things.
Yeah.
Like I sort of became obsessed with that idea of it. And I think that led to like me missing out on some Kairos moments. So I changed my password. And my password, it's changed even today. But I changed it to something that had to do with family and to being together
Mm,
with family.
mm.
And I don't know even what caused this like epiphany that I should do this, but it was like after hearing that song, I went home and I typed in my password and it was like, maybe this is causing it. Maybe this is what's made me so obsessed with success that I ignored like a cool moment with my kid. So I changed it and something miraculous happened. Not the next day. It was over several months, but over several months, it was like I stopped caring about how much money I made. I cared about there being enough in the bank account
Yeah. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
live, but it was like what I really cared about was like more time with my family. And I got this like sense of like urgency and craving to like spend more time with them and to like build deeper relationships with them. Things I had always done and wanted, but on like almost like a deeper, more visceral level where it became almost a part of me.
Hey, that's amazing. I want to ask. So, when do you think that if you were in the heat of Flirty Aprons, making $1,500 a month,
Mhm.
that you would have been able to have that same realization, or did it require some level of foundational success for you to have that realization?
It's a great question. Um, I mean, one of the companies I work on today is a company called
Yeah,
Neurobolics. I've been
yeah,
researching success. I've been researching the trifecta of philosophy, psychology, and neuroscience,
Okay.
and how they go together to make the most successful people in the world. And by successful, I don't mean the richest people in the world. I mean people
Mm,
that achieve and perform at a very high level, but also have a deep abiding satisfaction personally. They have great
yeah.
relationships with other people. They feel like they're building a great legacy. They know how to have enjoyment and happiness in their life. They have clarity around time, their values, the virtues that they aspire to.
Mm,
Now, if you take a sample of 100 people, and if you were to compare like the top 10 versus the top bottom percent, it's not really like a good measure. That's what a lot of companies do. Like some of the best companies that I really admire, like Zenger Folkman out there, they do this for leadership. And then they look at like thousands of different variables and they say, which of these differ between the top 10 and the bottom 10? Oh, these
yeah.
ones do. And let's go teach someone how to do those things. It's awesome. It works great. But if you look at success under like a holistic method like we are, and it's like the highest achievers that have what we call eudaimonia, which is like a flourishing, thriving life where they feel like they're on the good path. It's
Yeah.
only the top 5% that achieve that, not the top 10. And
How are we
everyone else
measuring
is
that?
very different from that.
Is
Well, we're
this a
measuring it by
is this a self
it
measurement
is.
that
It
you're
is self.
asking?
Well, it's both measured quantitatively and qualitatively. Because I don't
Okay.
think
Okay.
you can, someone can be delusional, right? They can
Yeah. Yeah.
say,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I am the king of Arabia, and yet, they live in a cellar or something like that. That
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
reflect
Yeah.
reality. So reality, they have to be realistic on their measurement. So they can't be unrealistic. They can't be delusional. But and so there's the quantitative aspect of like, do you meet these measurements, these baseline measurements
Yeah.
of success? And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
then there is this more important part of it, which is
Which is a qualitative
the
survey
qualitative
ask.
side of it. Do you feel like you are thriving personally, professionally in
Mm,
all of these domains? Only
mm,
5% of people. And
yeah.
really it's a subset of those five that really feel like they're thriving, but to be very generous, 5% of
Yeah.
people feel that way. And so when we talk about like success, it's like
Do you think?
I found, well, your question, could
Yeah.
could I have had that at the Flirty Aprons? Um, there are people who are struggling, but they're on a path towards success. Okay. They're
Yeah.
highly in debt or they have all these struggles and they're in a third world country, but they're in that top 5%. So you don't have to have achieved a certain amount of success necessarily to be
Mm,
there. But it's much harder, much,
mm.
much harder. The likelihood of finding someone in that top 5%, um, and they are not financially stable is very small, but you
It's
do
very
find
small.
them.
Because I feel like for me, when I had, we'll say, financial freedom, stability, it was the first time I let myself step back and ask myself why I was doing all of this,
Mm.
and not be just so stuck in the grind. And I think, I hope, I wish I would have done that earlier. And I think I maybe could have, but it would have been much harder, like you said, to truly step back and have clarity around the whys and find that fulfillment. I'm curious to your group of 5%ers. Are they staying in that 5% group or are they bouncing in and out of that 5%? And what keeps somebody there versus, they're there for today and 6 months from now, they're not, you know what I mean?
Well, people fall out of the 5% when they die, right? Because they're no
Okay.
longer
So
part of
there's
it.
some,
The sample
okay.
anymore.
Okay.
So you have to have some people going into it. But yeah, some people bounce out of it a little bit. Typically, if someone is in the 5%, they tend to stay in the 5%, even if they make big mistakes,
Okay.
even if they have like bad things happen to them, horrible things happen to them. And that's because they've developed a different sort of brain. When we talk about like someone becoming a better leader, when we talk about them thinking and behaving differently or feeling differently about life, what we're really saying is they've changed how they think. They've changed how their brain operates. Like
Yeah.
it's not like their muscles changed. It's not like necessarily their environment is that much
Their
different. Someone
circumstances
becomes
have
a better
changed.
leader, their brain has changed. And so like when someone gets into the top 5%, they have rewired their brain to think, behave, feel differently. And it has long lasting benefit to it. People can fall out of it. but they tend to kind of stay very close in that area.
I love your emphasis on neuroscience because I think it's an important thing for us to understand how the human brain is involved in making these changes. How if I'm not in the 5% today, right? If I'm in a
Mhm.
business and setting, in an environment with my family where maybe I'm not feeling fulfilled, I'm not feeling satisfied, I'm not feeling like those 5%ers. What's the journey like to the 5%? Is it a time-based journey? Can it be done quickly? Does it take years and years? Or I'm just curious, what's the journey to the 5% look like from your research?
Okay, so I'm going to say all this, and I'm going to say up front, this is not a sales pitch, even though part of it may
Yeah,
sound
yeah,
sales
yeah,
pitchy. It's not, right?
yeah,
Um, the dirty little secret, I don't call it dirty little secret, the beautiful secret here is that anyone can actually get into that top 5% that we've seen. Now, anyone that has a typical normal operating brain, let's say, can
yeah.
get into that top 5%. But what it takes is vulnerability and willingness and a desire to want to get there to start. So that eliminates like 80% of people because 80%,
Why would somebody not want to get there?
because a lot of people don't want to admit that they are the cause of a lot of the dysfunction in their life, that they are
So
the
it's almost
cause of
taking
a number of their
ownership
own
of where
problems.
they are, having an accurate understanding of where they are and why they are where they are.
It could be really painful. Like I read a book that was wonderful. It's called Feeling Good Together. There's this wonderful author named David Burns. He's one of the pioneers of cognitive behavioral therapy. And he wrote a book called Feeling Good back in the early 80s. He's updated that as Feeling
Okay.
Great today. But he wrote this book called Feeling Good Together about relationships. And in one of those sections in there, he talks about blame. And he says, he actually invites you to kind of weigh like whether it's a spouse or a brother or some sort of relationship, you're supposed to do this sort of like scale. On one side, you write all of the benefits of blaming them, and then you write all of the
Okay.
benefits of not blaming them. Okay. And then you're supposed to
Okay.
weigh those things at the bottom against each other. And he says, if you give them similar weight or if you weight the blame more, you might want to consider like terminating your relationship with this person. I think he says it in a different way. But that was sort of shocking to me when I read that. I was like, what? Why would you say that? Isn't this a book about helping you to like improve your relationships? And his point was, if you feel there's more value in blaming that person than not blaming them, he's never seen someone in his practice overcome the strength of that
That.
blame. So like you have to be willing to give that up. But well, so you hear that and you realize I'm the cause of a lot of my problems. And that can be really painful at
Yeah.
first, even though it's really liberating in the long run. At first, I think that's a really painful thing to admit and embrace.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why 80% of people kind of off the bat
I see
disqualify
what you're
themselves
saying.
because they don't want to do that sort of thing. But anyone can do it. So a lot of it, there's about 9 steps to this is what we've sort of discovered.
Yeah.
First one is understanding how your brain works and believing that it can change. If you have,
Yeah.
what Carol Dweck terms a fixed mindset, you don't believe that you can get smarter, you don't believe you can change, like it's an uphill
You're not
battle
doing
from
it.
here. It's going to be very
Yeah.
unlikely
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
do. Second part of it is decreasing therapeutic resistance. A lot of the issues that people have with depression or anxiety, because a lot of those mental illnesses or disorders come from actually a good part of themselves. A person has obsessive compulsive disorder and they wash their hands 50 times a day. A big part of that is because they value health and cleanliness.
Yeah.
And if you
Yeah.
try to
Yeah.
eliminate that ritual from them, you're attacking a good part of themselves as well. So like one of the methods that like someone like a David Burns would do is he'd use like the magic dial technique. He'd say, just turn it down. Like right now you're at a 10. You're a 10 out of
Mm.
10 at trying to be clean.
Mm.
You can stay clean, but be a 7 out of 10, right?
Yeah.
Or you
Yeah.
turn
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
down to a 9 to start. Eventually, hopefully you get it down to like a 5. And all of a sudden, like you're able to allow them to embrace these good parts of themselves without letting go of
Eventually.
all of it. And there's less dysfunction. So that's like the idea behind therapeutic resistance. You basically have to let go of the ego to let it die in many ways. And in doing so, you allow yourself to change. You allow yourself to think differently and not have this internal voice that attacks yourself. Third part of this is understanding like what success looks like. What is success for you? What is it generally, right? Governments, academia, they all claim it's money,
Yeah, and I feel like Joe, for me, this is a part I never did earlier on in my life was defining success because I think we are fed what success looks like, right? And other people tell us success looks like this. And in a lot of ways, success is really relative to what we're used to. Success in one neighborhood may be seen differently as success in another part of the country or the world. And it's so relative because success often is competitive and comparative rather than this internal definition that I think I've read some of your book and that I think you're talking about here, right? So maybe helps. Yeah, I want to talk more about this. How do you define success? Like, what is your recommendation for how people should define that?
Well, so let's talk about this top 5%. Okay.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that separate them from everyone else? They have three distinct things that are very, very different from like the bottom 20%. And distinct from the rest, but like clearly distinct from the bottom 20%. Their
Yeah.
sense of energy and aliveness is totally different. And it's not energy like
Okay.
bouncing off the walls. It could be bouncing off the walls, but it doesn't have to be, right? The sense of energy is
Yeah.
like they feel a sense of vibrancy internally about their mission, their purpose in life, about what they do every day. And that energy tends to come from a focus on mental health, physical health, and spiritual health. So,
Okay.
and it's not an everyday thing. So that's where people get caught into a trap. Like the people that are just below this 5% tend to oscillate a lot because they get so obsessive over like working out every day, reading the scriptures
One
every day, doing all
component.
these things every single day. If they take daily and turn it into daily-ish, what we see is adoption rate increase dramatically, right? So it's stop being so perfectionistic because perfectionism is actually the antithesis of good because perfectionism leads you to
Because
be stale, stagnant. You can't change or grow, right?
when you're
But
constantly guilty, if you didn't do something every day, you can't achieve your goal because there it goes.
exactly. But if you adopt a mentality of daily-ish, and what you find is like
I like daily
you
ish. All
enjoy
right.
it more. It's a lot better,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and and if you happen to have 100 days in a row, great. But then if you miss the 101st day, you don't like burn the wagon like I used to do when it comes to like trying to eat healthy. It's like, oh, I had a chocolate cinnamon bear. I might as well go eat a 15-pound bag. Like,
Might as well. I like that. No, I can relate to that. I really can. And my wife really struggles with that perfectionism, Abby, and yeah, I think I've learned more about it. Just like this idea of if you have this expectation of perfection, it's unattainable, and therefore it just beats you down, and you're never able to accomplish your goals because, well, if perfection is your goal, then you might as well give up the second it's unattainable, right?
it's also a mirage. Like, it's just not true because
Yeah.
for something to be perfect means it can't improve. But we know that we can actually improve every day. So,
I like
can you
that.
be
For
perfect?
something to be perfect, it can't improve. Wow. Yeah, it's a good, very succinct. Okay, I like this.
And this may this can be disconcerting for religious people, right? Especially Christians to hear like, wait, you're arguing against perfect? God said, "Be ye therefore perfect, even as I am."
Yeah.
Well, but if you look at the Greek definition of perfect there, what does that mean? The word that they translate as perfect actually is complete, really.
Whole and complete. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
complete
In
means
Chinese,
something
the
very
term
different
they
from perfect
use,
to me.
it's funny because in Chinese that translation is
Is
more
one
about complete.
unified,
Yeah. Yeah, you're complete, you're whole. But yeah, us
very
English
different, right?
speaking guys. Yeah.
And that's what our definition of success is around, is kind of being whole, right? So you start out with
Yeah.
understanding the path to it is understanding how your brain works, that you can change, decreasing therapeutic resistance, killing the ego, then understanding success. Let me just go through the rest of them really quick, and then I'll get back to
Yeah,
success
yeah, go
because that's
for
not what you want to focus on. Then it's about understanding time and these concepts of kairos, right, or
it.
chronos,
Yeah.
or memento mori, the fact that like you will die and accepting that, and that sort of getting rid of the fear that plagues you, because a lot of our fear, almost all fear, comes from something in the future. If you come really present, it's hard to really fear anything if you're very, very present.
Yeah.
So then,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
then the fifth thing is about um, working towards your relationships, understanding and improving how you work with other people, because that's very integral, very social brains and very social people. And then understanding your own personal values, not Joe Hansen's personal values, not Thaddeus's, not Tony Robbins or Arthur Brooks or any of these other people, or Malcolm Gladwell or any of these other people, their values. It's like identifying what yours are. And then the really important part of that, because this is what in psychology they call self-actualization, knowing what your own core values are, attaching timeless virtues to those. Because if your core value is just about having fun, but there is no sort of time-tested virtue that you've met with it, it doesn't really it doesn't produce very much. So you have to do that. And then the last two parts of this is really about enhancing your effectiveness every day. There's principles of flow. There's habits of effectiveness that you kind of learn from Peter Drucker and other people. And then because that makes you better at what you're doing and gives you more available time, improves what you do in your work and with other people. And then the last part of this is developing the habits and rituals that last a lifetime. And it doesn't mean habits like the perfectionistic daily habits. It's more like stacking habits. If you already have a habit of like driving to work every day, how do you stack something on top of that? That makes it very easy for you to accomplish something that you want to do.
To do something.
Or rituals or intentional habits. Every week, you could have a reminder in your calendar on Sunday morning for 15 minutes to read through some reflective questions that ask you about success, that ask you about life, it's your accountability check, right? Like those types of things chart you on a path that kind of keeps you in the 5% or like moves you towards it moving forward. Okay, so going back to, and I want to be cognizant of your time here.
Yeah. I think we'll wrap up in the next 5-10 minutes, but I think I want to talk a little bit more about this definition of success. Because
going back to the definition of success,
I wanted to say from what you're telling me is that a definition of success, your original goal, make 20 million by 40. What that sets up for failure, right? Like it's a siloed definition of success, which then leaves your ability to actually achieve fulfillment is not possible, right? Would you agree with that based on your research? Because it's an isolated measure of success.
Let's say my goal was made 20 by 40, right? Let's say I make that $20 million when I'm 35. What I've done is I've hit one bucket, but I've hit one bucket that was temporary, because the way our brains work is we're largely prediction machines. Our brains are always trying to anticipate what's going to happen. And a lot of the enjoyment we feel, a lot of the dissatisfaction, a lot of the planning, the drive that we feel comes from that desire to anticipate what's going to happen. It's one of the reasons why we all love sports so much, because there's such an addictive tendency to like not knowing what's going to happen and this sort of dopamine release that gets as you watch it, right? Same thing with gambling, definitely. And that's why you want to stay away from it, because it's so incredibly addictive, but doesn't provide any benefit for your brain at all or for your soul. But when we talk about success and this like obsession over the 40 or $20 million by the time I'm 40, I hit it by the time I'm 35, I have filled one achievement bucket, but that achievement bucket never goes away. Once you fill it, you got to go fill it again. So it's this mirage of like, I've probably used this word 2 or 3 times now. Some of these things that we believe are measures of success are not. And it's because, like you said, we've been told them, maybe by our parents, maybe at church, maybe at school, definitely by the media and by government, right? They're measures of success whenever they compare, sadly, whenever they compare races or whenever they compare different ethnicities or religions or whatever they're trying to create division with, their method of comparison is earnings, right? Well, these earnings don't make more, right? On average, white Americans make more than black Americans. They neglect to say things like Nigerian Americans make more than your average white American, which doesn't, hurts their argument. But it's always earnings. So what? So what if someone earns more money than another? That's one measure of success, and it's fleeting, because the amount that you earn is only predictive of like happiness to a certain extent, right? Above around $75,000, you need to be making like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars more to get a little bit of a boost in happiness
Yeah,
that you get from that.
the incremental improvement with money is so small.
But you're barraged with it every day that your success is tied to earnings. But in reality, success, as defined, I think, by some of the greatest philosophers throughout history, the ones that have withstood time, has to do with the pursuit of virtue, the understanding of yourself internally, strong relationships that grow over time, and growth of yourself. Those are the measures of success that are very internal, hard to quantify. There are ways of sort of quantifying those things, right? Of you can have people rate whether they have a good relationship with that person. You can have people rate whether they're doing good in the world. You can't really have the person rate it themselves. You have to take ratings from their circle of friends or other influences or people that they worked with. And that can work pretty well from a quantitative perspective. That's why it's so incredibly hard to do, and no one really does it. They do it from a leadership perspective, with certain companies do it because they're willing to pay to have people assess them because it's so pivotal to understand if someone's a good leader or not. But personally, and do you learn about this in school? Have you ever had a class in school where someone really hammered in, like, what is success? What creates this deep, abiding satisfaction? Because in our research, when we have interviewed lots and lots and lots of people and tried to understand these things and look through all the different academic journals on definitions of meaningfulness, happiness, success, and all these different things, there's one question that really sticks out. What do people want? Deep down, if you were to ask someone kind of like a cascading question series, like a Socratic method, if you were to say, what do you want? And you say, well, I want to earn $20 million. Why? Well, I want to do this. Why? Well, I want to do this. Why? And you keep going, why? You keep going deeper. That frustrating way that like a really good professor might ask you questions. What most people get down to at the very bottom, what they really, really want is to feel deep satisfaction. Deep and enduring satisfaction. That's what they want.
Yeah.
So then we reverse engineered that. And we said, okay, who are the people that feel deep and enduring satisfaction?
Yeah, let's understand that.
Who are those top 5%? What makes them different? We talked about energy being one of those things, right? Clarity is one of the big differences too. So, and when I talk about clarity, I'm talking about like clarity is very closely related to energy. It's this clarity of sense of purpose, clarity of your values, clarity of the virtues you aspire to, clarity of the pursuit of truth. Those things all go into a sense of clarity for a person. And the people that exude not positivity, but exude the type of energy that puts them in this 95% have strong mental clarity around those things. And some of those things can shift though. Like what is most important to you? Achievement may be a much bigger bucket when you're younger, but then your relationships may grow. You can't stifle them entirely. Otherwise you won't have deep satisfaction, but it may not be as big. Your legacy may not be as big when you're younger, but it becomes much bigger, and achievement may be smaller when you're older. But you have clarity around those things. And if one of those things is off, you feel it and you go fill it really quick. Yeah. So I'll let you.
Hey, no, I love this, Joe. I think if I had more clarity and more definition around what success looked like when I started my career, that the satisfaction I would have felt throughout it would have been far, far greater. And it's not that that's the easy button, right? I think I appreciate your nine focuses, because I think that there's not really an easy button, right? It's not tomorrow I'm going to be in that 5%. It's you have to, in a lot of ways, rewire your brain to structure it, to focus on the things that matter. And I think that's where you have to deliberately say, here's who I am. Here's what matters to me, right? The values, the clarity, here's why I am where I am today. And here's where I'm going to go. And without that clarity that I think many of us don't take the time to do, I didn't. it's like the Cheshire Cat. Success could look like anything, and it ultimately looks like nothing because you don't know where you're going. And so, I love that, Joe. So I think for my takeaway from this conversation today, my biggest one is just the importance of defining success. Yeah, I think that's just, it's not talked about enough, and definitely not taught. It's definitely not taught, and it's definitely done for us more often than not.
And find some
I
way
love
to
that.
remind yourself, right? Like it doesn't have to be, you don't have to change your password to what your life's goal is. Maybe you should.
Maybe you should.
Find some way to daily remind yourself about that. And it brings it present for you instead of it being something far off in the future.
Daily-ish, right?
Daily-ish. Oh, you got me. You got me.
Well, hey, Joe, I like to finish these podcasts with a question of, did you find what you were looking for? You've been wildly successful. I look up to you and respect and admire you as a mentor and a friend. Could you say that you found what you were looking for at the start of this entrepreneurial seizure?
I found what I was looking for in the process of doing it,
Yeah.
not at the end of selling it, right?
Yeah.
Not at some
Some
big end
financial
part,
destination. Yeah.
not at the financial reward. The process of doing it gave me what I was looking for. It taught me a lot.
I really like that. I like your emphasis on the process, Joe. And you've done that throughout your career. It's not something that you're doing now. And, you talk about the E-Myth process, prioritization. Um, Unfortunately, I think we live in an age of, get a six pack in 6 days. Or,
If
here's
you
the
could show me how to
five
do
things
that,
to
I'd like
solve your
to.
problem. Well, there's plenty of ads for it. So maybe we ought to start asking those people. But I think
Oh,
the secrets, the tricks, the hacks. That's kind of what people want. And the sad truth is they don't exist, right? It's a process of becoming that will ultimately get us in that 5% that you talked about. So I just thank you for your emphasis there. Thank you for impacting my life, and thanks for taking time to talk with all of us today.
Thaddeus, you are a very gracious host. You're too generous in what you say about me, but I'll accept all of it and say, working with you has been life changing, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on here, share a little bit, and thank you for everything.
Thanks, Joe. See you soon, man.